Most people assume that closing an app stops it from doing anything. In my opinion, that assumption is one of the most common and most incorrect beliefs people have about their phones today, because a huge number of apps are built to keep running quietly in the background, collecting location data and usage information long after you have swiped them away. Today, I am not going to tell you to just delete every app you own. I want to show you exactly where this tracking happens and how to actually shut it off. This video is about settings that already exist on your device, built by the phone manufacturers themselves for exactly this purpose. It will not involve any third-party tools or workarounds. Welcome to Cyber Safety Brief, where we explain simple cybersecurity advice for everyday Americans. This video is based on authentic, legal, and publicly available cybersecurity information. Everything here is for awareness and protection only. Point 1. Why closing an app doesn't actually close it. Let us start with the misconception that drives this entire problem. What most people underestimate is the difference between an app being visually closed on your screen and an app actually being fully shut down in the background. Many apps are specifically designed with background permissions that let them continue running certain processes, like checking your location or syncing data, even after you have stopped actively using them. Here is a real-life type of example. Someone closes a shopping app after browsing for a product, then notices ads for that exact product following them across completely unrelated apps for days afterward. In my opinion, this is not a coincidence, and it is one of the clearest everyday signs that background tracking is happening, even though the app itself was never reopened. What I personally think surprises people the most is realizing that this is not necessarily a flaw or a bug. In many cases, it is exactly how the app was designed to function from the very beginning, with background permissions granted somewhere during setup, often through a quick tap on a permissions pop-up that most people click through without reading carefully. Point 2. Location permissions are the biggest culprit. Let us focus on the setting that matters most, because in my opinion, it deserves far more attention than people give it. What most people underestimate is how many apps request always allow location access when they genuinely only need it while the app is actively open. Most phones offer 3 location permission levels, allowing access only while using the app, allowing access always, or denying access entirely. The middle option, always, is where most unnecessary background tracking actually happens. A real-life type of scenario. Someone installs a simple utility app, like a flashlight or a basic game, and grants full-time location access without thinking twice, not realizing that app now has the ability to track their movements around the clock, far beyond anything the app actually needs to function. The way I look at it, very few apps genuinely need constant location access. Navigation apps and certain safety apps are reasonable exceptions. Most others do not need it at all. What I personally think is worth pausing on here is why an app would even ask for this level of access in the first place if it does not need it functionally. Often the answer comes down to data. Location history is valuable information that can be used or sold for advertising purposes, which means some apps request broader permissions than necessary simply because that data has value, independent of whatever the app's actual advertised purpose is. Safe steps. Go into your phone's privacy or location settings. Review every app currently set to always allow location access and change it to while using the app or never for anything that does not have a clear, legitimate reason for constant tracking. Point 3. Background app refresh and activity. Beyond location, there is a second setting most people never touch, related to what apps are allowed to do while sitting unused in the background. What I personally think surprises people is learning that this setting exists separately from location permissions entirely. Both iPhones and Android devices have a setting that controls whether apps can refresh their content, sync data, and perform other background activity even when you are not actively using them. This is different from location tracking specifically, but it contributes to the same broader pattern of apps quietly collecting and sending data without your direct interaction. Here is a real-life type of example. Someone notices their phone battery draining faster than expected, checks their battery usage breakdown, and finds an app they rarely open consuming a surprising amount of background activity. In my opinion, unusual battery drain from an app you barely use is often one of the clearest practical signs that something is running in the background more than it should be. What I personally think makes this setting worth checking regularly is that new apps are added to your phone constantly, and each one comes with its own default background behavior. An app you installed months ago and forgot about entirely can still be quietly refreshing content, checking for updates, and syncing data in the background, using both your battery and potentially your data in ways you never actively agreed to on an ongoing basis. Let me know in the comments if you agree with this. Do you think most people even know background app refresh settings exist on their phone? Point 4. Ad tracking and cross-app identifiers. Now let us talk about a type of tracking that is less about location and more about your behavior across different apps entirely. What most people underestimate is that both major phone operating systems assign a unique advertising identifier to your device, which apps can use to track your behavior across different apps and build a detailed profile of your interests, even without knowing your name directly. This is exactly why an ad for something you searched in one app can show up in a completely unrelated app shortly after. In my opinion, this is one of the more invisible forms of tracking because it does not require constant location access at all. It just requires apps sharing this identifier with advertising networks behind the scenes. Both major phone platforms now offer a setting that lets you either reset this identifier or specifically opt out of this kind of cross-app tracking, usually found under privacy or advertising settings. What I personally think everyone should do is find this setting and turn on the option that limits ad tracking, sometimes labeled as an app tracking transparency feature or a similar name depending on your device. It will not stop every form of tracking, but it meaningfully reduces how easily your behavior gets stitched together across different apps. A real-life type of example worth mentioning. Someone resets their advertising identifier and enables tracking limitations, and over the following weeks notices the ads they see feel noticeably less specific and less unsettling compared to before. In my opinion, this is a genuinely satisfying, tangible result from a setting that takes less than a minute to find and change, which is exactly why I think more people should know it exists. Point 5. Microphone and camera indicators. Here is a feature I think more people should actively pay attention to, since it exists specifically to catch unexpected access. What I personally think is one of the most useful, underused features on modern phones is the small indicator dot or icon that appears at the top of your screen whenever an app accesses your microphone or camera. Both major operating systems have added this specifically, so users have a real-time signal when something is happening that they might not expect. A real-life type of scenario. Someone notices the microphone indicator appear briefly while using an app that has no obvious reason to need audio access at that moment. In my opinion, this does not automatically mean something malicious is happening, since some apps have legitimate background reasons tied to features you may have enabled. But it is worth investigating further, checking that app's specific permissions, and revoking microphone or camera access if you cannot identify a clear, legitimate reason for it. Point 6. Smart home devices and wearables. Before we move to auditing your permissions, I want to briefly mention a category of tracking that extends beyond just the apps on your phone. What most people underestimate is that smart speakers, fitness wearables, and other connected devices in your home often sync with companion apps that carry their own separate set of permissions and data collection practices. A fitness tracker, for example, might collect not just your activity data, but also location information throughout the day, all funneled through an app that may have its own background permissions, completely separate from the ones we have already discussed. In my opinion, the same principle applies here as with phone apps. Check the companion app's permissions specifically, rather than assuming a device is only doing what its primary function suggests. A real-life type of example. Someone reviews their fitness app's permissions and discovers it has been granted full-time location access, well beyond what is needed to simply track steps or workouts. and adjust the setting to only collect location during actively logged exercise sessions instead. Point 7. Doing a full permissions audit. Instead of checking apps one at a time, both major phone platforms actually let you view permissions from the opposite direction, organized by permission type rather than by app. What I personally think is the most efficient approach is going into your privacy settings and reviewing permissions by category, seeing a complete list of every app with location access, every app with microphone access, and every app with camera access, all in one place. This is far faster than opening each app individually and lets you spot anything unexpected much more quickly. The way I look at it, doing this kind of full audit once and then repeating it every few months as you install new apps is a much more sustainable habit than trying to carefully review permissions every single time you download something new. A real-life type of example: someone does their first full permissions audit and is surprised to find an old app they forgot they even had, still holding on to full location access years after they last opened it. Point 8. Balancing privacy with actual app functionality. I want to be honest about something before we wrap up because I do not think this should be an all-or-nothing decision. In my opinion, turning off every single permission for every app is not realistic, and it is not even necessary. Some apps genuinely need certain permissions to work properly, and being overly restrictive can break features you actually want to use. What I personally think matters most is being intentional rather than automatic, actually thinking about whether a specific app needs a specific permission, rather than tapping Allow out of habit just to get past the pop-up as quickly as possible. I do not think this is about being paranoid. I think it is about being prepared, and taking 20 minutes to review your permissions today can meaningfully reduce how much of your daily life is being quietly collected without you ever fully realizing it. I would also like to know your opinion. Were you surprised by how many apps had access to your location or microphone when you finally checked? If this video helps you understand online safety more clearly, like the video and subscribe to Cyber Safety Brief for more simple cybersecurity advice. Stay alert, stay informed, and stay safe online. Before you go, comment below which app surprised you the most once you checked its permissions.